Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is the American Family Radio Talk Network. Got a special guest on the line. Before we bring him in, I just want to finish up with one thing on heritage analysis of the impact of the Rubio amnesty bill. Again, I walked you through some of the details about the fact that illegal aliens right now receive far more in taxpayer-funded benefits than they contribute in taxes. And when Heritage analyzes this over the lifetime of the typical illegal alien, right now the typical illegal alien is 34 years old. Heritage estimates they're going to live on an average of 50 years. If you add everything up, they're going to become eligible for 80 means-tested welfare programs, eligible for Medicare, eligible for Social Security. Over the course of a lifetime, each illegal alien who is amnestied under the Rubio plan would receive, here's the factoid, here's the one thing you need to remember, the average adult illegal alien would receive $592,000 more in government benefits than he would pay in taxes, almost $600,000. So illegal aliens together would receive $9.4 trillion in government benefits. They would pay $3.1 trillion in taxes. The net impact increasing the federal deficit by $6.3 trillion. So those are factoids for the day. Average illegal alien will receive $592,000 more in benefits than he pays in taxes, contributing to an increase in the federal deficit of $6.3 trillion. Bad idea all the way around. Well, let's bring our special guest in on our decision maker line. Raymond Ibrahim, he's the author of the upcoming book. I've got a preview copy of it, Crucified Again. Raymond Ibrahim is a Middle East and Islam specialist. He is the Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and an Associate Fellow at the Middle East Forum. Raymond, thanks for taking time to chat with us today.
I'm very happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about your brand new book, Crucified Again. Tell us what that is all about and what prompted you to write it.
Sure. Well, what prompted me to write it is actually the subtitle of Crucified Again, which is Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. And in fact, the book is already out. It's been out for a week now. The reason I wrote it is basically to fill a void that the mainstream media has not filled, which is to report on the brutal reality of what Christians from one end of the Islamic world to the other are suffering. And so the book really, what I do is to demonstrate this. I go, instead of discussing country by country as one would think, I determine numbers of themes that are actually backed up by Islamic doctrine and Islamic law. For example, that churches should not be built or they should not even be renovated or fixed. And then I show you how from one end of the Islamic world to the other, from Indonesia in the east, from Morocco to the west, sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, Sudan, Uganda, all the way up north, Turkey, Central Asian countries, you'll find that they're all doing that exact same thing in the same exact pattern. And of course, it's not just attacks on churches. You have attacks on Christian worship, Christian freedom of worship. Muslims who apostatize or convert to Christianity are regularly attacked, brutally beaten, sometimes killed, decapitated. As we speak, there's an American citizen in an Iranian prison right now who's being forced to recant Christ because he's considered an apostate because he's of an Iranian heritage. And so you have all this thing that's going on. Christians are constantly attacked for supposedly blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad. Many of us in the West are familiar with this, where a cartoon will set off riots and destruction. And usually, even when it's a Western cartoon, the Christians will be the first ones to be attacked because a lot of the Muslims conflate Christianity with the West still. And so it's a sort of collective punishment. So fundamentally, the point of the book is really to expose what I consider the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time, and it's one that your average American has no clues going on.
Let me ask you this question, because I've talked about this frequently on this program, the very things that we're talking about here, Raymond, and I'm struck by the subtitle of your book, Islam's New War on Christians. Drop the word new from that. Islam, according to the subtitle of your book, is at war with Christians. It is engaging in a war on Christians. Now, you don't say, and here's what I want to ask you about, you don't say radical Islam's war on Christians or extremist Islam's war on Christians. You say that Islam itself, if I understand the title of your book and what you've just been describing, Islam itself is at war with Christianity and waging war on Christians.
You know, you're absolutely correct, and your average person would want to use words like Islamist or radical Islam or extremist Islam. And the reason I don't do that is because, as I was indicating earlier, Islamic Sharia law, which is not radical, which is to say, or what I mean by that, it is radical, but it is what it is, and if I follow it, if I'm a Muslim, then I'm just following Islam. I'm not following something that's warped or twisted. So, for instance, Islamic mainstream Sharia law of all schools and Sunni sects unequivocally prohibits the building of new churches on Islamic lands, and it even prohibits fixing old ones that already exist. Sometimes in Egypt recently, they tried to fix a toilet in a dilapidated church, and they couldn't even get a permit for it, and when they fixed it anyway, they were attacked, and the toilet was destroyed, and people were imprisoned. And so likewise, the idea of apostasy in Islam, okay, not radical Islam. Islamic teachings are such that he or she who is born as a Muslim cannot leave Islam, cannot convert to Christianity, cannot become an atheist. They can't do that. And if they do, according to mainstream Islamic doctrine, the punishment is death. And you see that happening all the time. So this is why it's difficult to really call this extremism or radicalism, because it is the teachings. These are the mainstream documented teachings. There's no gray involved. It's black and white, and you see it, and that's the whole point in the book, that it's happening from one end of the Islamic world to the other. So it's kind of hard to say, well, it's an extremist thing when you have the same identical pattern all over the place. And when you think about it, so I cover countries that are of different races, different cultures, different languages, different economic circumstances, different politics, and yet you see the same identical forms of persecution. Why? Because they trace right back to Islamic teachings. And so this is the reason why the title of the book, of course, is Islam.
Now, Raymond, I'm talking here with Raymond Ibrahim, the author of the new book, Crucified Again, exploring Islam's new war on Christians. And you mentioned the example, I think you were alluding to Saeed Abedini, the one that's in the prison in Iran, being beaten and tortured for his faith, and simply for believing in Christ, even though he was raised as a Muslim. And Raymond, you probably have seen the new Pew poll of Muslims around the world, the most extensive survey of Muslim attitude around the world. I mean, 39 Muslim countries, 38,000 interviews. And that seems to verify, I'm looking at a piece by Andrew Bostom on American Thinker summarizing some of the findings of that Pew research poll, but that seems to verify what you are saying, that these attitudes, these convictions, these operating principles are a part of mainstream Islam. They're not part of the extremist fringe. This is what Islam teaches, and this is what Muslims believe.
Exactly. You make a great point by referring to that poll. You know, if you look at it, you'll see various nations that sometimes in the Western media will try to portray as moderate, and you'll see numbers like 75% believe that the apostate should be put to death, he who leaves Islam. 80% believe that he who insults the Prophet Muhammad should be executed. And so, again, it's kind of hard to say that out of a billion people, 80% believe in X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z is actually being taught by the religion. We have all the text in front of us. There's nothing hidden anymore. And at the same time, we want to dismiss that as it's just a fringe or a radical element, and that's just not reality.
A couple of questions as we kind of head toward the close of our conversation here. One of the things I was struck with in the Pew poll is that in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we have spent untold amounts of American treasure and spilled American blood to rebuild those nations. And I want to ask you a question about whether it's possible to do nation building in a Muslim country. After we've been there, 91% of Iraqis and 99% of Afghani Muslims still support making Sharia the official law of their states, and 42% of Iraqi Muslims and 79% of Afghani Muslims are still in favor of execution, capital punishment for conversion to Christianity. Can we do nation building in Islamic countries?
The bottom line, as you alluded to, is wherever the U.S. or Western powers, any Islamic country that they have gone and helped, quote-unquote, liberate from dictators, all of those countries have taken a turn for the worse when it comes to the resurgence of Islam, political Islam, and the persecution of Christians and other minorities. So, let's begin with Afghanistan. Under U.S. auspices, while the United States was there, and as you pointed out, spending, treasure and lives to free this country, The last known Christian church was actually destroyed by the government, by the U.S.-installed government. When the United States went into Iraq and liberated it from the tyrant Saddam Hussein, immediately a massive anti-Christian jihad burst out where literally dozens, if not hundreds of churches were bombed, several every single Sunday, and hundreds of Christians killed, to the point that now in post-liberated Iraq, more than half of the indigenous Christian population is either dead or has fled. And so this goes to the point of, and now it's the same thing with this idea of the Arab Spring, which the Obama administration has wholeheartedly supported it. You see, under the guise of democracy and freedom, which is very intelligible to a Western mindset, and it makes sense to say, well, you know what, these people are angry, upset, and frustrated because, after all, look, they're being ruled by a dictator. If we get this dictator out, then immediately they're all going to be some sort of, Western mentality, liberal, secular. And that's not it. What's happening is that's the narrative that we're being fed, and we're helping them. So first in Libya, in Egypt, now in Syria, and all of those three countries have all taken a turn for the worse from a humanitarian point of view. In Libya, you could have said whatever you want about Gaddafi, but now that he's gone, all of a sudden you got an attack on the U.S. consulate by the same exact al-Qaeda-linked members that the Obama administration actually empowered to fight and kill Gaddafi. You have unprecedented acts happening against Christians. The very small amount of churches in Libya are under attack now, being bombed. Nuns who've been there since 1921, helping the poor and needy, have been evicted and pushed out. And in Syria, it's the same thing. All of a sudden, we're helping the jihadis to fight Assad, which, again, no one's saying he's a great guy, but at least he's a secularist, and Christians living in Syria have had it pretty good. Now, all of a sudden, the U.S. is supporting the jihadis. Again, the same story that happened in Iraq is now happening in Syria, with Christians being targeted left and right, butchered, mutilated, decapitated, and all of them, again, are fleeing Syria. So it's this disconnect of what we're being told freedom means and what it really means on the ground.
Our guest has been Raymond Ibrahim. He is the author of the brand new book, which I recommend to you, Crucified Again, Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. Again, our author guest saying, look, it's Islam itself that is hostile toward Christianity. It's Islam itself and the teachings of Islam that motivate this implacable hostility on the part of Muslims around the world toward Christians. Raymond, thank you for taking time to be with us, and tell folks how they can get a copy of your book very quickly.
Sure. They can if they Google it and go to Amazon, Crucified Again, Exposing Islam's New War, they can get it at a pretty good price. If they go to my website, Raymond, last name Ibrahim, Ibrahim.com, they can also click onto it and read reviews, and it's out there at bookstores as well.
Thank you.